Well, I'm happy to bring Wes Reynolds back on the air for our Wednesday Wagering with Wes Reynolds segment. You can find Wes on Twitter at Wes Reynolds and the number 1. Wes, how's it going today, man?
Hey, Adam. Good to be back with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. How's everything going with you, man?
Not too bad. Just into the swing of things with football, and it seems like basketball is dominating the news today in light of what we're hearing as we speak down at Louisville. So, that's coming up. So this is starting to be a busy time of year.
All right, well, let's go ahead and talk about that because I touched on it a little bit in the last segment, but we were focused on college football and the NFL, and usually our Wednesday Wagering segments with you just kind of a catch-all. We sort of talk about a lot of different things. Let's talk about that Louisville situation here first and foremost, I guess, since those are probably the biggest names that are involved in this scandal. Looks like Rick Pitino going to be fired. Maybe he's already been fired. Maybe there's been confirmation of that already. This is probably going to get a lot worse for a lot of programs before it gets better, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. And, I mean, it's actually breaking the story as we speak. Reportedly, from some well-connected people down at Louisville, Tom Jurich, who is the AD at Louisville, who, if you look at his tenure, has been a very effective AD, got them into the ACC, really has made Louisville a pretty good national football program. They've always been solid in basketball, and then plus new facilities, the new baseball compound. They're a national powerhouse now in baseball. Their women's basketball program is really good. It's been a very effective AD down there, but I guess he was given the option to let Rick Pitino go, and he says if he goes, I go, and Louisville said, okay, then you both go. So, that looks like that is happening as we speak. Apparently, they've got a news conference here at about 1 o'clock Eastern time to go ahead and make whatever announcement they're going to make. But yeah, this is I think for people that follow college basketball closely, they know that this goes on. I mean, this is not a secret. It's just, the confirmation of actually hearing about it. And, I mean, you've always seen, I guess, cheating in college basketball in terms of payments of players and whatnot, but that used to go a lot of times through the boosters and the donors. It's really not that way anymore. I mean, I'm sure maybe it still goes on at a couple places, but it's a little more sophisticated now, involving agents, involving runners, involving the shoe company folks. So, I mean, this goes on across the board. I mean, I don't think any of us are naive to believe that just the 4 assistants representing their 4 particular programs and now what's going on in Louisville, I don't think people are naive to believe that those are the only few programs that are doing this on a national level.
No, definitely not. I mean, I think what the surprising thing is that people have finally gotten caught for doing something. I mean, that's ultimately what the surprising thing is here. And Rick Pitino has survived a few things there in Louisville and throughout his coaching career, to say the least. I mean, there was the prostitution scandal a couple of years ago, or maybe even last year now. I don't know. It feels like all of them run together there. But from a betting standpoint here, I mean, obviously Louisville futures are probably going to crater a little bit with Pitino leaving. You're going to have the kids that aren't one and dones looking to transfer. Louisville's got to figure out a new head coach now. And, if they completely clean house and wipe everybody off the staff, then that's something that has a pretty big carryover effect because the season is, about 6 weeks away or something like that. So what kind of betting impact do you feel like we'll see here?
I think you're going to have to see, I would expect if they're going to appoint an interim coach, that it would be somebody on the staff, maybe somebody like Kenny Johnson, who was actually a former assistant at Indiana and was the coach of the Team Takeover program, which was a prominent Nike program in the D.C., Maryland, Virginia area. So that's actually where he kind of got a start coaching and is known as a pretty good recruiter. So, somebody from the staff probably, I'm guessing, gets elevated. And Louisville was a team that a lot of people liked this year, and I was one of them because I think they had a lot of guys back. They have a lot of size on the team, so and they've always played pretty good defense. So they were a team I really liked, but I mean, it's obviously hard to like them now when there's just that cloud of if there's going to be any sanctions, which you would assume that there would be, and then a change in coaches, and then guys that are, guys commit largely because of head coaches. So who's looking to get out, maybe who's looking to transfer. I mean, we already saw today with Auburn. They had a 5-star commit power forward for next year coming in, and he's already decommitted. So, you're seeing, I think, a lot of these changes, and I mean, it's breaking kind of by the minute here.
Yeah, and I'm sure that more will be coming along the way here as we, keep digging into this whole thing, and as we keep seeing, probably. Now, I guess here's one question, and I don't know if you can answer this, but if you don't mind speculating here for a minute, we've got this scandal, and a lot of people were kind of looking at it yesterday and sort of wondering, why government agencies were getting involved, why the FBI was getting involved, and, if this would maybe be a gateway to something more and maybe some more scrutiny, some more investigation. Do you feel like maybe we get a larger scale crackdown now?
I think you might. I mean, one of the things that you look at here, and a lot of people will, and I don't want to be put in the position of having to defend the NCAA here, but, in a lot of these instances, the NCAA doesn't have subpoena power. This becomes a lot more serious when it's the FBI who has subpoena power, and that there were, so many layers to this thing. If you read the indictments and read any of that stuff that was released and watched the from the Southern District of New York Attorney's Office, I mean, I think, anywhere you slice it, there's always going to be cheating. I mean, it depends on what your definition of cheating is. I mean, what happened here was cheating, but it's also kind of standard operating procedure. I mean, Louisville is not the only program that got a kid because of a shoe company. I mean, it happens everywhere. And, I'm interested to see, where this is going to go forward. I mean, I'm assuming over time at least, it might not be within the next day or week or month, but over time, you'll see other stories, I think, come out in terms of, maybe some other people that are involved in this type of thing, or if some other people were involved with this particular agent that was named in the indictment. So, stay tuned, I guess, is the best thing to say, because I don't think this story is over.
No, I don't think so either, and who knows how many more schools and how many more programs will be affected, because some of the assistant coaches that have been named here in this indictment have had multiple stops. So, there's going to be investigations into their previous employers as well. So, this is certainly going to be some kind of rabbit hole to go down here, and it will get a lot of play with some of the big name programs that have been mentioned in this report. We'll get a lot of play here over the next 6 weeks until we get actual games to kind of, take us away from all of the preseason news here. But let's go ahead and get over onto the NFL side of things here, and I'm sure that we can talk about this college basketball thing a little bit more as we get closer to the season. But I want to discuss this a little bit with you here, and, this is something that you and I talked about last year when we were on during football and basketball seasons, derivative betting. You are a very, very, very high-volume guy, as people that follow you on Twitter know. So you look for edges pretty much everywhere you can get them. I think a lot of people are still under the impression that you have to bet full games, sides, and totals. That's not the case. You want to look for opportunities wherever they are presented, whether it's a half wager, a live wager, something like that. So, have you found that the NFL market specifically has made adjustments to a higher volume of wagers like that?
Well, it's going to be interesting as the season goes along these next couple weeks if they make adjustments, because I wish I had the number in front of me, but I saw it the other day, and it's something that I usually do a lot. The first half totals of what you're seeing here, you're seeing a lot of these go under, and kind of the magic number on those is 23. And you've been seeing a lot of these first half totals, at least early in the season, go under. And then the scoring in some of these games pick up in the second half. I mean, I'm looking, none of the first half totals are up this week. I think William Hill put up the Thursday night game, the Chicago Green Bay game, and they've got it 23 juiced under minus 115. So that's kind of been the magic number on some of these first half totals here, because I think you've been seeing a lot more unders early on in the season. I think that's going to, regress to the mean, I guess, over time. You're going to see these teams kind of get more comfortable with their offenses. And, I mean, you have some teams that don't have their starting quarterback. Indianapolis is a perfect example. Or teams using new quarterbacks in the role. Cleveland, another example with starting a rookie in Kaiser. But I think, that's something that you look at. And then with some of these dogs that you like, and, I mean, you saw a lot of these underdogs covered last week, some of the first halves have been good bets. Chicago, I think, was +4 against Pittsburgh last week. That's something I had. There were several others where Cincinnati covered the first half against Green Bay. Cincinnati got a lot of sharp play as a big underdog on the road. They covered the first half, and you've just been seeing a lot of this. And I think, when the numbers kind of start to get tighter, I mean, when we play stuff like the Super Contest or any other type of contest, the numbers are what they are. They're not going to change. But in terms of betting, and actually putting the tickets in your pocket, you got to look at, I think, a little bit at that first half, and then you got to look at, some of the teasers. I personally on teasers only do it with the NFL, but you see a lot of these home underdogs maybe getting like 2.5 or whatnot, and you can play those and tease those up to 8.5, and all of a sudden those are pretty good bets. I mean, I did that with Minnesota when they were a dog last week. They eventually became the favorite on game day, but there were several of them. I mean, I think I teased last week Minnesota with Seattle. Seattle was on the road. Now, Seattle kind of got lucky, and they backdoored that teaser. But, teasing through the 3 and the 7, I think, even though people know about it, it's still pretty good value in the NFL.
Is there a formula that you're looking for? I mean, I'm looking, for example, at the Cincinnati-Green Bay game where the full game number was 7, but the first half number was 4 with extra juice on Green Bay. A similar situation there in that Pittsburgh game where the full game number was 7. Some places even had it 6.5, but the first half number on Chicago was 4. So is that kind of what you're looking for? If you see one that's, more than half of the full game spread with some favorable juice, is that kind of a math play for you?
A little bit, and it's also a situational play. I mean, you look at, the first half really on Sunday, I didn't even play that first half in the Chicago game until game day. That was a little bit of a situational deal because all of a sudden what came out, what broke about an hour and a half before the game is what are the Steelers going to do in light of these, these protests or signs of unity, whatever you wanted to call it, and that there was, the fact that this kind of played on their mind so close to game time, I thought, that's got to take a little bit of your focus away. And I played it, and then all of a sudden, I felt good about it, getting it confirmed, because all of a sudden you saw a bunch of money on the Steelers first half where, all of a sudden the Pittsburgh side being -4 was like plus money, was plus 105 or plus 110. And that was an indicator that you've got some money coming in on the dog here in the first half. So, it's math, but it's also, situational plays. And I just think that, if you're getting that kind of value, when you're getting over a field goal in the first half on some of these dogs that are 6.5, 7, something like that, that just gives you a little bit of extra value, I think.
No, I think that's smart. And you talk about traditional situational plays in the NFL, back-to-back road games, things of that sort. I mean, Baltimore and Jacksonville here this week, obviously coming out of playing the game in London. So, you can do some of those things where you make a first-half play, maybe on an inferior team. But then in the second half, if the better team, shows up, so to speak, or flips the switch, so to speak, then you've still wound up locking something in there for the first half. So is that kind of your preferred way now to play the NFL, Wes? I mean, we know it's a very tight market. We know it's all about value in the number. In terms of breaking down the X's and O's, you can find some small edges. Maybe you can quantify them a little bit. But a lot of times you're just looking to get 6.5 instead of 7, 7.5 instead of 7, stuff like that in the NFL with reasonable juice. That's going to dictate more often than not what you do the NFL. But is that your preferred method now? Do you prefer to look first half, second half, and maybe even avoid the full game altogether?
It is now, and I've been doing more and more of that with a little bit more success, because the thing about it, when you bet if you bet some of these games early in the week, Tuesday or Wednesday, then you develop a market perception, sometimes, and it reminded me of the Philadelphia-Kansas City game. I believe that was week 2, where I really liked Philadelphia coming off of that, because I thought, the Chiefs looked so impressive against the Patriots that everybody's going to want to bet them. And then you kind of saw a lot of people say, well, I like the Eagles here. And the Eagles kind of became one of those, and this is more pronounced in college probably than it is in the NFL, but the Eagles kind of started to look like a trendy dog as the week went on. And I like to try to avoid as much as I can those trendy underdogs. I mean, you kind of saw it in college football last week with Mississippi State was very trendy. And then, I mean, that line got down to almost 3 for Georgia, and Georgia ended up just hammering them. I think it was 31-3. And, Stanford was kind of a public dog a couple weeks ago at USC, and USC eventually got away from them. So, you got to kind of look at that a little bit, and balance the derivatives with also the situations. And you brought up just a moment ago the situations in terms of 2 straight road games. You saw that exactly last week with the Dolphins. They were out in L.A. for a while, displaced kind of by Hurricane Irma. Well, they came out and they got a big road win at Los Angeles. In that small stadium they're playing in. But then all of a sudden they got to go on the road the next week, and they got to go across the country to New York. So it's like these guys haven't been home in forever, and that was just a perfect situation for the Jets last week. And, almost shut them out until about the very last play of the game. So you really got to look at those scheduling spots, I think, more so than, the typical X's and O's or the typical, raw stat numbers or whatnot, or which team is better or which team just has better talent. I mean, you've got, I think, kind of to be successful in the NFL, combine the situational spots with, just looking at the pure numbers and the pure odds that they're putting on the game. And, scheduling dynamics are kind of everything, especially in pro sports.
All right, let's apply some of those concepts here to this Thursday night game between Chicago and Green Bay. And, this is a tough act to follow here with the Rams-49ers game last week, which was easily the best Thursday night game we've probably ever seen, given the drama that we had. I mean, it wasn't the most well-played game, obviously, but 41-39, lots of fun, lots of fireworks, all that. This is a really, really interesting handicap on a lot of levels for me here. You got a Chicago team coming off of an outright upset win in overtime at home. Huge win for them. Now it's a short week to take on Green Bay. This is a rivalry game. Not an easy spot for the Bears. On the other hand, Green Bay really struggled with the Bengals, didn't play well the week before against the Falcons. They have significant injury problems, particularly on the offensive line, and it's a short week. And injury problems in a short week never really mesh well together. So Green Bay is a 7-point favorite here, but there are a lot of pros and a lot of cons on both sides of the ledger.
Yeah, and that's actually what's making me maybe look a little bit more at the total here. Obviously the perception is the primetime games to the over, but, what kind of makes me look a little bit to the under here is one thing that you mentioned was the Green Bay offensive line. And also the fact that I think defense is better than what they showed against Atlanta and then early against Cincinnati. I mean, Green Bay, if you look, their defense really hasn't traveled on the road. I mean, they've given up a lot of 30-point games and even some 40-point games on the road, but at home it's been much better. And if you noticed something last week when they were playing against Cincinnati, and actually Tony Romo, who's been, I think, really excellent in his short time in the broadcast booth, Tony Romo pointed out the Bengals were doing their 20-play script. Some teams do 15 or 12 or whatnot, but the Bengals were doing the 20-play script and were kind of able to move the ball effectively on Green Bay and do some things they wanted on offense. But once that script was out, Green Bay, I think, had an idea of what was coming and, held them to 3 points the rest of the game because the Bengals got, I think it was about 21 points, very quickly into the early second quarter. And then Green Bay, I think, was able to shut down their offense. So, it would have me looking at the under here. I think Mike Glennon hasn't been a disaster for Chicago, but, he's kind of been, not really great. I mean, I think it's their running game, kind of that duo of Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen, who really carried them offensively. So, I mean, the under, I haven't played anything yet, but the under would be my initial look on this game because, I'm kind of struggling to lay points with Green Bay with the offensive line issues because I think that's such a key to their offense, and allows Rodgers to sit back there forever or even get out of the pocket and, be able to hold the ball a lot longer than a quarterback should, with all the pass rushers in the league. But so I mean, the total would probably be the way I would look there.
One thing I do like about this game from a Chicago standpoint, and honestly, if I wanted to lock in my Super Contest plays prior to the Thursday night game, I would take Chicago as one of the top 5, I think, because one of the things I do like about this, and I read that same thing that Tony Romo had mentioned as well about the 20-play script. I love Dowell Loggins. I think Dowell Loggins is going to be a very successful offensive coordinator, maybe even head coach here soon, sort of following that Adam Gase blueprint. But Dowell Loggins has the ability with the 2 backs that he has, and of course Jordan Howard is banged up, so maybe that opportunity is a little bit mitigated here this week. But he has the opportunity to be unscripted as we go throughout the game. He can give Green Bay's defense different looks, whereas Cincinnati, they don't have a whole lot of creativity. I mean, they're going through an offensive coordinator change. They lost Hugh Jackson a couple of years ago. Marvin Lewis isn't exactly a creative offensive mind. So I think Cincinnati was limited in that respect, and Chicago won't be as much. So there's kind of something to that element where, like I said, you can find some X's and O's and some schematics things. You can't necessarily quantify them, but they can possibly be factors in a play for you.
Yeah, I think so. And, I mean, when you're talking about the Bears, I mean, the fact that you've got a guy, the combination of Howard, who can kind of get you some of those tough yards. I mean, he can break big plays, but he's not necessarily a home run hitter per se. He's a singles and doubles guy and, can, keep you moving the chains. But Cohen is really, I think, kind of their home run hitter in terms of, hey, let's base. Let's throw some passes in the flat, or let's do some screens, and let's see him make some moves and make a play in the open field. And I think having that balance, always kind of keeps a defense off guard rather than having, 2 similar backs with the same skill set. But the Bears would be the way I would go. I would go if I had to play it. Some places are offering 7.5 where you got to lay minus juice, but that's, I just think, kind of a books will do that for teaser protection. So sometimes when you notice that in terms of looking at the betting board and looking at the line, that's not always money moving that. That's sometimes the book artificially adjusting that in order to protect against so many teaser plays. Because I'm sure at a 7, you're going to see a lot of people try to play Packers teasers and tease that down to 1, where it's like, okay, well, they just pretty much got to win the game, or even if they do 7-point teasers and tease them down to pick, lay an extra juice, they know that they're going to get hit with Packers teasers at home on a primetime game. So, that's something that I think you want to be aware of before drawing any conclusions about, if there's a lot of support for the Packers out there.
2 more games I want to hit on here with you, Wes, for Sunday, and both of them kind of fall under the same mindset, the same umbrella, so we'll group them together here at the end of this segment. But the first one is Carolina. New England is a 9-point favorite in this spot. Now, New England has not looked good. Offensively, they've looked, for the most part, okay. Defensively, they look nothing like the group from last year. They have some serious problems on that side of the football. Playing Carolina, whose offense looks about as bad as humanly possible. Kelvin Benjamin is practicing today, so maybe that'll be a nice boost for Carolina. But no Greg Olsen, the most reliable pass catcher on this team. Now, they do have the ability to use Christian McCaffrey in a lot of different ways, but Bill Belichick's defensive game plan, along with Matt Patricia, is pretty much always take away the best player, we'll make someone else beat us. Right now, that's probably Christian McCaffrey. So a lot going on with this game, and you kind of have to wonder here, at what point does the betting market, or at what point does the betting populace come around to the fact that maybe New England's just not as good this year?
Yeah, this is kind of the chicken or the egg question in terms of what's going on here with the Carolina offense. Is this going to be the Carolina offense gets right or the New England defense gets right? And because neither have looked very good. Cam, I still think, is, expressing signs of, this shoulder injury and whatnot. He hasn't really looked that great. If you look at what New England kind of likes to do defensively, they like to keep those quarterbacks that are more mobile in the pocket, and they were able to do that successfully in the Super Bowl couple years ago against Russell Wilson in Seattle. Carolina is going to need to have Christian McCaffrey to have a really big game to kind of take that burden off Cam, and then with Greg Olsen out. I don't think that the Patriots are really as dominant. I mean, we don't have, I think, one really great team in this league right now. I mean, we're only into week 4 and we've only got 2 undefeated teams right now. So, I mean, this shows you that there is, and I hate the term because sometimes it's overused, but that there is parity in the league, and there's not really a lot of great teams. There's a few good ones, and I still think New England is one of those. But, you're looking this week, I mean, they gave up 30-plus points to Houston last week, who had their guy making only his second-ever NFL road start, Deshaun Watson. And, that team that they struggled to really, I think, get by Cincinnati in that Thursday night game. I mean, I just this is something I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do with this game because, I would initially, I guess, look to the over. In terms of the side, I think the price is probably the number at 9 probably looks right here. But I'm still trying to figure this out, and it is kind of a mystery as if, can Carolina's offense get right against a struggling New England defense, or can New England's defense get right against a Carolina offense that has some injuries and are banged up and, has really kind of struggled to get out of the gate the first 3 weeks?
Well, of course, one of those undefeated teams, Atlanta, was a yard and a review away from falling to 2-1 last week. So, like you said, I mean, we don't have that team where I feel like you can go out there and trust them to lay any number. And that sort of is a segue into Sunday Night Football here to talk about Indianapolis and Seattle. Seattle is a 13-point favorite in this game. They're minus 11 in point differential on the season. They've given up 59. They've only scored 48. They've had problems protecting Russell Wilson. I mean, maybe this is a spot where Seattle just goes out there and reminds everybody what their ceiling is, how good they can be. But I was stunned to see this number open as high as it did.
Yeah, and I know that you feel the same way. I mean, you don't really get rich laying double digits in the NFL long term. I mean, this could be a situation where it's not the worst bet in the world, though, because I think, you're kind of getting a buy low on Seattle, even though the spread is so high. And everything you've said about Seattle's offensive line is really true. And I don't think that they're as good as the Super Bowl Seattle was a couple years ago. But one thing you take in mind is the fact that they have the best home field advantage in pro football. And so they're always going to get a little bit of a premium added into the line at home. And I think you see it here. But one of the things looking at the matchup, the Colts have really, I think, on defense, they're very young. I mean, they had 10 new starters this year, essentially, with Vontae Davis out, and he's probably not going to be back for, I think, a couple more weeks. You're looking at the fact that if you've watched the Colts, which I have, they have a little bit of trouble keeping the edge and on defense, and when you have trouble keeping the edge against Russell Wilson, that's probably the worst thing, because I think Seattle, knowing that their offensive line has been having some issues, they're going to try to get Russell Wilson a little bit more out of the pocket, maybe where he can make some plays on the run and throw the ball on the run. And they were able to do that a little bit against Tennessee last week, even though Tennessee, I think, kind of got away from them. And a lot of that was because of, the Sherman personal foul, and I think that really ticked Tennessee off and, made them raise their game, and they kind of got away from Seattle a little bit, even though Seattle cut it to 6 at the end of the game. But, the Colts defense, I mean, they run kind of this, I don't know how to term it, like this high school zone a lot, and you can really move the ball on them. And, they had a big lead on Cleveland last week and had to really kind of hang on for dear life. DeShone Kizer was able to make plays with his feet. They were able to find spots in that zone and really move the ball down the field after the Colts had gotten out to a big lead. And that's the second week in a row that they started out pretty well and started out with the lead. They, of course, blew it in overtime against Arizona in week 2. But, I mean, I think that line, probably scares people off because people are going to be scared to lay 13 with Seattle, but it might be something where they're kind of like a contrarian favorite, where people, I think, are scared to lay those points, but, that might be something where, the books, usually the books in those type of games, they're going to more often than not need the dog, but they may actually need the favorite here.
No, I think it's a fair point. I mean, I looked at this number, and as I said there in my initial thoughts on the game, I was surprised to see it this high. And my first inclination is to look at Indianapolis. I think offensively they have looked better with Jacoby Brissett by a large margin over Scott Tolzien, and he can give them a little bit of that Russell Wilson-esque dynamic if he does need to get out and run. Now, the Browns didn't get a ton of pressure on him, and the Browns made it really easy. I talked about this in the previous segment. Their safeties are playing 20, 25 yards off the line. So Brissett was just playing pitch and catch with T.Y. Hilton. Jack Doyle made some catches over the middle. The Browns linebackers played really well in run coverage, but, Seattle's going to be a different type of test for the Colts because their defense, despite how they've played so far this year, is still loaded with a significant amount of talent. So you are onto something there about the, kind of contrarian favorite type thing. And I'll be curious to see, what the breakdowns are for the Super Contest, both the traditional and the gold, and then also where this number goes throughout the week.
Yeah, and, I'm wondering that myself. And, what you were saying, I think, is so true about, Brissett clearly is a major upgrade over Tolzien. He didn't play bad in his first start, except for, he threw the interception in overtime, which led to Arizona, kicking the game winner. But I think, one of the things you often hear is you make the most improvement from week 1 to week 2, and that's usually for a team. And I think that you saw that with Brissett last week. I mean, he made the most improvement from the first start against Arizona to the next start against Cleveland. So, all of a sudden, And just listening to some of the local media in Indianapolis, all of a sudden it's like, okay, the season is saved. You know, they have a win. The fact that, you know, being that it's so early in the season, you know, they're not 0-3 and haven't fallen out of things. So, you know, there's a little bit of optimism, but I still think that this team has a lot of problems. The Colts have their own offensive line problems, too. I mean, they got mad because Brissett was able to make some plays, and Cleveland really wasn't able to put a lot of pressure. But I still think Seattle with Bennett and Averill can still get a lot of pressure on the edge and even up the middle on the Colts offensive line, which has kind of been reshuffled with Ryan Kelly being out the center, and then having to move Muhort to the right side, where I thought he was most effective last year with Costanzo on the left side. So, you know, the Colts in Seattle, like many other teams in the league, kind of have offensive line problems. So Seattle might have the personnel that's going to be able to take advantage of that more so than Cleveland was last week.
Well, it should be an interesting card to watch. And, of course, you can follow Wes's timeline at Wes Reynolds, the number 1, to see what he's got going on here for the NFL, and then also those derivative plays, first half, second half, maybe some live stuff as well. But, Wes, great to have you back on the program today, man. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Hey, good buddy. Good to be back with you as always.